On Christmas morning, my son Silas called and said, "Dad, maybe he should just stay home this year." He meant my 19-year-old Danny, my autistic son. I didn't argue. I simply said, "I understand," and hung up. That evening, Danny and I created our own Christmas. By nightfall, my phone was buzzing nonstop, 25 missed calls. I had no idea that our quiet decision would soon become the story that changed everything. I'm grateful you're here listening to this story. Before I tell you what happened next, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching this from? The smell of cinnamon rolls filled our little house on Cedar Avenue as Christmas morning light streamed through the kitchen windows. I stood at the counter watching my 19-year-old son Danny's fingers dance across the old upright piano we'd moved to the living room years ago. His autism made the world overwhelming sometimes, but when he played, everything made perfect sense. Danny had been up since dawn, not because of presents waiting under the tree, but because Christmas morning meant music. He'd already worked through 3 different arrangements of White Christmas, each one more beautiful than the last. His gift wasn't just playing what he heard. He could transform any melody into something entirely his own. "That's gorgeous, son," I called out, wiping flour from my hands. At 59, I'd learned to treasure these quiet moments. 4 years since my wife Grace passed, it had been just Danny and me figuring out life together in this old house in Denver. Some days were harder than others, but mornings like this reminded me we were doing okay. The phone rang just as Danny transitioned into a jazz version of Silent Night. I almost didn't answer. Christmas morning calls usually meant family obligations, and we'd been planning a peaceful day at home. But the caller ID showed Silas, and despite everything, he was still my older son. "Morning, Dad." His voice carried that familiar distance, the careful tone he'd perfected over the years whenever Danny came up in conversation. "Merry Christmas, Silas. How are Scarlett and Olivia?" "Good, good. Listen, Dad, I wanted to talk to you about tonight." He paused, and I could hear voices in the background. Probably Scarlett's family gathering for their elaborate Christmas dinner. Maybe he should just stay home this year. Not Danny, not your brother, he. The words hit exactly as intended. No explanation needed, no details required. We both knew who he was and why Silas thought he should stay home. The careful politeness in his voice made it worse somehow, like he was discussing a scheduling conflict instead of excluding his own brother from Christmas. I looked across the room at Danny, completely absorbed in his music, unaware that his existence was being debated like a problem to be solved. His dark hair fell across his forehead as he leaned into a particularly complex passage, his whole body moving with the rhythm only he could hear. "I understand," I said quietly, and I did understand. I understood that my older son was ashamed of his brother. I understood that Danny's stimming and occasional outbursts made Silas uncomfortable around his in-laws. I understood that it was easier to exclude than to educate, easier to hide than to defend. "Thanks, Dad. I knew you'd get it. Maybe we can do something next week, just us." Just us. The phrase hung in the air after he hung up, bitter as burnt coffee. Danny looked up from the piano, his brown eyes bright with the joy that music always brought him. "Dad, do you want to hear the song I wrote for Mom?" My chest tightened. Every Christmas he composed something new for Grace, playing it to her photo on the mantel. This year's piece would be beautiful, heartbreaking, and completely wasted on an empty house if we followed Silas's plan. I walked over and sat beside him on the piano bench, the same spot where Grace used to sit during his evening concerts. "Are we going to have Christmas dinner with Silas tonight?" "Dad," Danny asked, his voice hopeful in that innocent way that always broke my heart. The question hung in the air. I could lie, make excuses, protect him from the truth for another year, or I could do something different. "You know what, Danny, we'll make our own Christmas." His face lit up with the kind of pure happiness that reminded me why I'd fight the whole world for this kid. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, I'd made up my mind. Danny deserved better than hiding at home because his brother was embarrassed. I grabbed my coat and turned to him. "Get your jacket, son. We're going out." The Riverside Community Center sat just 6 blocks from our house, a modest brick building that hosted everything from senior yoga to kids' birthday parties. I'd heard Helen Martinez, our neighbor from 2 streets over, mention their Christmas potluck for folks spending the holiday alone. Seemed like the perfect place for our own Christmas celebration. Helen's face lit up when she saw us walk through the double doors. "Emric, Danny, I'm so glad you came." She wore a bright red sweater with a reindeer that had actual jingle bells, and her smile was warmer than any fancy family dinner could ever be. The main hall buzzed with quiet conversation. About 30 people milled around tables covered in mismatched dishes, homemade casseroles, store-bought cookies, someone's famous green bean salad. These weren't society folks putting on airs. These were real people, elderly widows, single parents working holiday shifts, college students too far from home. Danny hung close to my side, at first overwhelmed by the unfamiliar voices and holiday music playing from someone's portable speaker. But Helen had a gift for making people comfortable. "Danny, I remember your mom mentioning you play piano," she said gently. "We've got that old upright in the corner if you'd like to try it out. No pressure, just if you feel like it." I followed his gaze to the corner where a weathered piano sat beneath strings of twinkling lights. Someone had placed a small poinsettia on top, and sheet music was scattered across the bench. Danny's eyes held that familiar spark I knew so well. "It's okay if you want to play," I told him. He approached the piano like he was meeting an old friend. His fingers found the keys, testing the tone, adjusting to the slightly out-of-tune middle C. Then, without any fanfare, he began. What started as Silent Night became something else entirely. Danny's version wove in jazz harmonies I'd never heard before, building layers of melody that seemed to wrap around the room like a warm blanket. Conversations stopped. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Even the kids playing in the corner grew quiet. When the last note faded, the silence stretched for several heartbeats. Then applause erupted. Not polite party clapping, but the kind of appreciation reserved for something truly special. "That was incredible," whispered Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman I'd seen walking her dog around the neighborhood. "Just beautiful." Helen had tears in her eyes. "Danny, that was a gift. A real Christmas gift to all of us." I noticed she'd been holding up her phone, and something told me she'd captured more than just a memory. As we helped clean up later, people kept approaching Danny with genuine warmth. No awkward stares, no whispered questions about his condition, just appreciation for what he'd shared with them. Walking home under the streetlights, Danny hummed his arrangement while snow began to fall. For the first time all day, I felt like we'd made the right choice. That feeling lasted exactly until we stepped through our front door, and I saw my phone blinking with notifications. 25 missed calls. I woke up Boxing Day morning to my phone buzzing like an angry wasp. 7:30 a.m. and notifications were pouring in faster than I could read them. Facebook text messages, voicemails, my phone hadn't stopped since we'd gotten home. Helen had posted the video. "Christmas Miracle Boy." She'd titled it with a simple caption, "Sometimes the most beautiful gifts come from the most beautiful hearts." This young man made our Christmas unforgettable. The numbers were staggering. 50,000 views overnight, 1,000 shares, 500 comments, and they kept coming. "This made me cry at work," wrote someone named Jennifer from Ohio. "What a gift," commented a music teacher from Portland. "Beautiful soul, this is what Christmas is really about." I scrolled through comment after comment, my coffee growing cold, as strangers from across the country poured out their hearts. Parents of autistic children sharing their own stories. Musicians praising Danny's natural talent. People simply moved by the pure joy they'd witnessed. By noon, the video had jumped platforms. Someone had shared it to TikTok, where it exploded again. YouTube versions started appearing with titles like "Autistic Teen's Christmas Piano. Performance will make you believe in magic." The hashtag Christmas Miracle Boy was trending in Denver, then Colorado, then nationally. Danny wandered into the kitchen around 10, completely oblivious to the digital storm swirling around him. "Morning, Dad. Can we have pancakes?" "Sure, son." I tried to keep my voice steady as my phone rang for the dozenth time. Channel 7. News this time. "Mr. Sullivan. This is Maria Rodriguez from Denver 7. We'd love to do a feature story on your son's incredible performance yesterday. Would you be available for an interview? An interview on television about Danny." I looked at my son happily mixing batter and humming yesterday's arrangement. He had no idea that millions of people were watching him, sharing his music, calling him a miracle. To him, it was just another morning, just another song. "I'll need to think about it," I told the reporter. But they kept calling. The Denver Post wanted a story. Good Morning Colorado requested a live appearance. Radio stations, podcasts, even a talent agent from Los Angeles, who somehow got my number. "Dad, why is your phone so noisy?" Danny asked, covering his ears as another call came in. "People liked your music, son. They really, really liked it." His face lit up with that pure happiness that had no agenda, no calculation. "That's nice. Can I play more songs for them?" The innocence of it broke my heart. While the world was discovering Danny's gift, his own brother had wanted to hide him away. The irony wasn't lost on me. Strangers were celebrating what family had rejected. By evening, I'd given 3 phone interviews and declined a dozen more. The story was spreading beyond Colorado now. Christmas Miracle Boy had over 2 million mentions. Videos of Danny's performance were being shared in languages I couldn't even identify. I was scrolling through messages of support when my phone rang with a familiar number. Silas. For the first time in months, I almost didn't want to answer. Dad, we need to talk. His voice was different. Careful but not cold. Almost apologetic. I'm listening. We saw the video. Everyone's seen the video. Scarlett's been getting calls all day from friends asking about Danny. He paused. Maybe we made a mistake yesterday. 10 days later, Silas called with an invitation that caught me off guard. Dad, it's Olivia's birthday this weekend. She specifically asked if Grandpa and Uncle Danny could come. Scarlett and I talked, and we'd really like you both there. No mention of the video. No acknowledgement of what had happened on Christmas. Just a simple invitation that felt almost normal. I stared out the kitchen window where Danny was building the snowman, his cheeks red with cold and joy. The viral video had brought interview requests from 3 more news stations, but we declined them all. Danny was happy just being Danny. You sure about this, Silas? Of course, Dad. Olivia's been talking about it all week. She wants Uncle Danny to play Happy Birthday on the piano. Saturday afternoon found us standing on the doorstep of Silas's house in Highlands Ranch, a sprawling suburban palace with balloons tied to the mailbox and luxury cars lining the circular driveway. Scarlett opened the door wearing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Emric, Danny, so wonderful you could make it. Her voice carried that practiced cheerfulness of someone hosting a party they weren't entirely comfortable with. Olivia, however, was genuinely thrilled. She launched herself at my legs with 8-year-old enthusiasm. Grandpa, you came, and Uncle Danny. She grabbed Danny's hand without hesitation, chattering about her new bike and the chocolate cake waiting inside. The backyard was full of families from Scarlett's country club circle, parents whose kids attended the same private school as Olivia. They smiled politely when introduced, but I caught the subtle glances the way conversations paused, when Danny stimmed or hummed quietly to himself. He's the one from the video, I heard someone whisper. For an hour, everything seemed promising. Danny played games with the kids, his gentle nature winning over even the most hesitant children. Olivia appointed herself his official guide, showing him her playhouse, and introducing him to her friends as my super cool uncle who plays piano like magic. Then Scarlett announced lunch. The main table was set beautifully. Matching plates, cloth napkins, winter flowers as centerpieces. Enough seats for all the adults and older kids. I looked for Danny's place setting, expecting to see it beside mine. Oh, we set up a quiet spot for Danny, Scarlett said, quickly gesturing toward the kitchen door. Somewhere he'll be more comfortable. Away from all the noise and excitement. I followed her gesture and felt my stomach drop. Through the kitchen doorway sat a single plastic chair at the breakfast counter, a paper plate, a juice box instead of the fancy drinks being served outside. Hidden, separate, shameful. You're hiding him like he's shameful. The words exploded out of me before I could stop them. Silas stepped forward, hands raised in that placating gesture I'd grown to hate. Dad, the other parents might not understand. Some of these kids have never been around someone like Danny. We thought it would be easier for everyone. Easier for who? I grabbed Danny's hand, my voice shaking with fury. You haven't learned anything. Nothing at all. Grandpa. Olivia's small voice cut through my anger. She stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. Why is Grandpa leaving? Did I do something wrong? My heart broke for her, but I couldn't stay. Not when my own son still saw his brother as a problem to be managed, an embarrassment to be hidden from polite company. In the car, Danny was quiet for several blocks before asking, Did I mess up the party, Dad? No, son, you didn't mess up anything. But as I drove home through the January afternoon, one thought echoed with crystal clarity. Nothing will ever change. They would never see Danny as anything more than an inconvenience. It was time to stop waiting for them to come around. Sunday morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. If they won't accept Danny, we'll find people who will. Danny, how would you feel about an adventure? I asked over breakfast, watching his face light up at the word. What kind of adventure, Dad? The musical kind? Pack your bags, son. We're going to Nashville. Within 2 hours, I'd loaded our Honda Civic with everything we'd need. Danny's portable keyboard, my old camera, enough clothes for a week, and a cooler full of sandwiches Grace used to make for our family road trips. Danny bounced in the passenger seat, more excited than I'd seen him since Christmas morning. The 12-hour drive to Nashville gave us something we hadn't had in months, uninterrupted time together. Danny sang along to every song on the radio, his voice weaving harmonies I'd never heard before. Somewhere outside Kansas City, he started composing lyrics about highway signs and truck stops, turning our mundane journey into something magical. "Dad, look at those clouds," he said, pointing out the window. "They look like piano keys." I followed his gaze and smiled. Only Danny could see music in a January sky. We rolled into Nashville Tuesday evening, the city's neon lights reflecting off the Cumberland River. Broadway Street pulsed with honky-tonk music spilling from every doorway, street musicians on corners, tourists snapping photos with guitars and cowboy hats. "It's so loud," Danny said, covering his ears as we walked past the crowded bars. "We'll find somewhere quieter," I promised. Wednesday morning brought us to Centennial Park, where a weathered, upright piano sat under a pavilion, part of Nashville's Play Me I'm Yours public art project. A few joggers passed by, but mostly we had the space to ourselves. "Want to try it out?" I asked. Danny approached the piano like he was greeting an old friend. His fingers found familiar keys, then began transforming Amazing Grace into something that belonged in these rolling Tennessee hills. The melody stayed true, but he added country flourishes, a little twang here, a gospel run there. A jogger stopped, then a couple walking their dog. Within minutes, a small crowd had gathered, phones appearing as people captured this unexpected morning concert. "Kid's got real talent," said a man in a cowboy hat who introduced himself as a session musician. "Y'all visiting from out of town?" "Denver," I replied, watching Danny lose himself in the music. "We're on a musical journey." When Danny finished, the applause was genuine and warm. Someone dropped a 20 in his keyboard case. A grandmother asked for his autograph. A teenager requested "Sweet Caroline," which Danny delivered with a country twist that had everyone singing along. That evening I posted our first video, Danny and Dad's Musical Journey, Day 1. Simple footage of Danny at the piano, the Nashville skyline in the background, strangers becoming friends through music. The response was immediate. 100,000 views in 2 hours. Comments pouring in from around the world. "Where are you going next?" asked a viewer from Australia. "This is beautiful," wrote a music teacher from Maine. "Following your journey. More cities, please," requested someone from Texas. I looked at Danny peacefully reading a book about famous pianists, completely unaware that our adventure was just beginning to capture hearts across the globe. Tomorrow we'd head south to New Orleans. But tonight, for the first time in months, I felt like we were exactly where we belonged. From Nashville, we headed south like musical nomads, chasing melodies across America. New Orleans welcomed us with jazz flowing from every doorway in the French Quarter. Danny discovered a piano at Jackson Square, where street musicians had been gathering for decades. Within hours, he was jamming with a trumpet player named Marcus and a drummer called Big Joe, their impromptu trio, drawing crowds thick enough to stop traffic. "Kid plays like he's been doing this his whole life," Marcus said, shaking his head in amazement as Danny wove complex jazz harmonies around a simple melody. The video I posted that evening, Danny plays jazz in NOLA, exploded beyond anything we'd seen. 500,000 views overnight. Comments in French, Spanish languages I couldn't even identify. The hashtag Chachers Danny and Dad was trending not just in America, but internationally. Memphis came next, where Beale Street's blues legacy called to Danny like a siren song. At Handy Park, he sat down at another public piano and transformed traditional blues into something entirely his own. The crowd that gathered was different here. Older, more knowing people who'd heard real blues their whole lives. When Danny finished a haunting version of Summertime, an elderly man with tears in his eyes pressed a worn harmonica into his hands. "For luck, son, you got the gift." Chicago's Millennium Park offered yet another musical education. The classical setting inspired Danny to attempt Chopin, his interpretation so moving that passing businessmen stopped mid-conversation, phones forgotten as they listened to this young man make a public piano sing like a concert hall Steinway. Each city taught Danny something new, and he absorbed it all like a musical sponge. Jazz runs from New Orleans blues, soul from Memphis, classical precision from Chicago. Our followers grew from thousands to millions. Fan mail arrived at hotels we'd booked days in advance. interview requests from major networks, donation offers we politely declined. But the real magic happened in the quiet moments between performances. Danny and I sharing po' boys in a New Orleans cafe, him humming new melodies while I drove through the night. Hotel rooms where he'd practice on his keyboard with headphones, while I answered emails from strangers whose lives had been touched by his music. "Dad, I like this adventure," he said one evening in Chicago, looking out at the city lights. "People here understand my music. They understand you, son, the real you." For the first time in his 19 years, Danny was experiencing the world not as someone to be managed or accommodated, but as someone to be celebrated. His confidence bloomed like spring flowers, and my pride threatened to burst my chest. Then came the call that changed everything. "Mr. Sullivan, this is Frederick Harrison from Carnegie Hall. We've been following Danny's journey, and we'd like to invite him to perform on our main stage." I nearly dropped the phone. "Carnegie Hall, are you serious?" "Completely serious. We have an opening on Valentine's Day. Would Danny be interested?" I looked at my son, who was composing something new on his keyboard, completely absorbed in creating beauty from nothing. "Danny, how would you feel about playing at the most famous concert hall in America?" He looked up, eyes bright with curiosity. "Will there be people there who like music? The people who love music most in the world?" "Then yes, please." As I confirmed the booking with Frederick, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Grace died. Pure, uncomplicated joy. We'd found our tribe, our purpose, our place in the world. For this perfect moment, nothing else mattered. The call from Frederick Harrison had barely ended when I noticed the first cracks in our perfect world. It started with the comments. Scrolling through Danny's latest Chicago video that evening, I found messages I hadn't seen before mixed in with the usual praise. "This is child exploitation. Where's social services? That man is using his disabled son for money. Someone needs to rescue this poor kid from his fame-hungry father." I frowned, refreshing the page. More appeared, all with similar language posted by accounts I'd never seen before. Emric Truth and Concerned Viewer seemed particularly active, commenting identical accusations across multiple videos. By morning, the negative comments had multiplied like a virus. Every platform, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, suddenly flooded with the same accusations. The timing felt too coordinated to be coincidence. Then the media coverage shifted. Channel 7. Denver ran a follow-up piece I caught on my phone. "Local father's viral journey, inspiration or exploitation." The same station that had celebrated Danny's talent just days before was now questioning my motives. Child welfare experts are weighing in with concerns about commodifying disability, the reporter announced over footage of Danny playing piano. My stomach dropped. Someone was feeding them this narrative. The doubt spread quickly. Even longtime supporters began asking questions in the comments. Is Danny okay with all this attention? Does he understand what's happening to him? I tried to focus on the positive responses, and there were still thousands of them. But the accusations gnawed at me. Who would orchestrate something like this? Who had the motivation to destroy what Danny and I had built? The answer came with a phone call that made my hands shake. "Mr. Sullivan, this is Jennifer Martinez from Colorado Department of Human Services. We've received several reports about your son's welfare. We need to schedule an investigation." "Investigation?" My voice cracked. "Danny is perfectly fine. We're on a musical tour. Sir, we have concerns about potential exploitation of a vulnerable individual. Multiple sources have contacted us with detailed allegations. We'll need to interview both you and Danny within 48 hours, or we'll issue a warrant for his protective custody." The room spun around me. Protective custody. They wanted to take Danny away. "We're in Chicago right now preparing for a Carnegie Hall performance. Mr. Sullivan, I suggest you return to Colorado immediately. This is not optional." After she hung up, I sat on the hotel bed staring at my phone. The systematic nature of the attack, the timing, the inside knowledge of our location, it all pointed to someone who knew us personally, someone who had access to our family information, someone who felt threatened by our success. That evening, Helen called from Denver, her voice tight with concern. "Emric, I've been hearing things in the neighborhood. People are asking questions about why Danny isn't with his family. There are rumors going around that you kidnapped him or something equally ridiculous. Helen's social services is threatening to take Danny away. Someone's been spreading lies about us." I know, honey. I've seen the comments online. But Emric, you need to tell the truth publicly about Christmas, about why you really left Denver. These lies are spreading too fast, and people don't know the real story." I looked at Danny, peacefully practicing for Carnegie Hall, unaware that our world was collapsing around us. She was right. The only way to fight lies was with truth. But telling the truth meant exposing my own family's cruelty. It meant burning bridges that could never be rebuilt. It meant choosing Danny over everyone else once and for all. I spent most of January 21st staring at my laptop screen cursor hovering over the Go Live button. Danny practiced quietly in the corner of our Chicago hotel room, unaware that I was about to change everything. At 7 p.m. I finally clicked it. The truth about Danny and Dad, live. Within seconds, viewers started flooding in. The chat exploded immediately. Finally, tell us the truth. We're here for you. What really happened? My hands shook as I adjusted the camera angle. 50 people became 500, then 5,000. The numbers climbed so fast I couldn't track them. Thank you for joining me. I began, my voice steadier than I felt. You deserve the whole story. The real story about why Danny and I are on this journey. I took a deep breath and told them everything. The Christmas morning call, the birthday party kitchen seating, the coordinated attack on our videos after we found success and happiness. Danny looked up from his keyboard, smiled at the camera, and went back to playing softly. A gentle soundtrack to the hardest conversation of my life. The viewer count hit 25,000. Comments poured in faster than the system could display them. This is heartbreaking. Your family is disgusting. Danny deserves better. You're an amazing father. I showed screenshots of the fake comments, the systematic campaign designed to destroy us. These aren't random concerned citizens. This is my own family trying to tear us down because we found happiness without them. Because Danny's autism isn't something to hide, it's something to celebrate. Danny isn't a burden. I continued, my voice breaking slightly. He's a gift to the world. Every city we've visited, people see what I see. A young man with extraordinary talent and a beautiful soul. The only people who can't see it are the ones who share his DNA. I gestured to Danny, who had been listening while he played. Son, would you play the song from our first Christmas together? The one from the community center? Danny's face lit up. He positioned his hands over the keyboard and began Silent Night, the same arrangement that had started our journey, but somehow even more beautiful now. The melody filled the hotel room while 50,000 people watched in complete silence. When he finished, the chat exploded. I'm crying. That was beautiful. Justice for Danny. Shame on that family. This is why we travel, I said as Danny continued playing softly. This is why we perform. Because Danny deserves a world that sees his worth. And if his own family won't give him that world, then we'll find it ourselves. The live stream ended with over 50,000 viewers and thousands of shares, already spreading across social media. The truth was out there now, impossible to take back. For the first time since the attack began, I felt like I could breathe again. The aftermath of the live stream was swift and devastating. By morning, the story had exploded across every social media platform. Justice for Danny trended worldwide, but back in Denver, the consequences for Silas and Scarlett were immediate and brutal. Silas's marketing firm received hundreds of complaints from clients threatening to pull their business. We don't work with companies that employ people who abandon disabled family members. One email, raid. His colleagues avoided him in hallways, and within a week, he was quietly asked to take indefinite leave. Scarlett fared no better. Her country club friends stopped returning calls. Parents at Olivia's school whispered in pickup lines. The perfect suburban image they'd protected by rejecting Danny had crumbled completely. Meanwhile, Colorado Department of Human Services called me with a very different tone. Mr. Sullivan, after reviewing the evidence and interviewing multiple witnesses, we're closing this case. No evidence of abuse and overwhelming evidence of appropriate care. The social services investigation that had terrified me vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Carnegie Hall confirmed our Valentine's Day performance with enthusiasm. We're honored to host Danny, Frederick told me. This is exactly what our stage was built for. February 14th arrived crisp and clear. Walking into Carnegie Hall, Danny's eyes went wide at the red velvet seats and golden ceiling. It's so beautiful, Dad, like a music box. The theater was sold out. As we waited backstage, Danny seemed remarkably calm, warming up with the same focus he'd had at every street corner. When Danny walked onto that legendary stage, the audience rose to their feet before he'd even touched the keys. The standing ovation lasted 3 full minutes. Then he began Silent Night, flowing seamlessly into amazing grace. then into an original composition he'd been working on during our travels, a piece he called Journey Home. The music filled every corner of that sacred space, and I watched 2,000 people experience what I'd known all along. Danny wasn't disabled, he was differently gifted. When the final note faded, the theater erupted. People wept openly. The standing ovation lasted 10 minutes. Backstage afterward, Danny hugged me tightly. "Dad, are you happy?" "Yes, son, we're free." 6 months later, we'd found our rhythm. Regular performances at venues that welcomed Danny's gifts. A small apartment in Nashville where he could practice without worrying about neighbors who didn't understand. A community of musicians, autism families, and supporters who saw Danny for who he truly was. Helen visited us in our new place, bringing homemade cookies and updates from Denver. "Everyone knows you did the right thing," she said quietly. Even people who used to ask nosy questions about Danny have changed completely after seeing his success. She paused, then added, "Silas lost his job. Scarlett barely leaves the house anymore. Olivia asks about you and Danny constantly." I felt a pang for my granddaughter, but not for the choices her parents had made. That evening, as Danny composed a new piece inspired by the Nashville skyline, I reflected on our journey. Sometimes you have to leave to find your real home. Sometimes the family you choose matters more than the family you're born into. "Dad, I'm glad we went on our adventure," Danny said, looking up from his keyboard. "Me too, son, me too." Outside our window, Nashville hummed with music, and somewhere in the distance, a street musician played for tourists and dreamers. We'd found our place in this symphony of souls who understood that different doesn't mean less. It means special. It means gift. It means exactly what the world needs. Looking back on our journey, I realized God had a plan all along. When Silas made that Christmas morning call, I thought our world was ending. But sometimes what feels like rejection is actually God's way of redirecting you towards something better. Don't be like I was for so many years, waiting for others to accept and love your child unconditionally. Don't waste precious time hoping family will change when they've already shown you who they are. I spent too long making excuses for people who saw Danny as a burden instead of the blessing he truly is. This true story taught me that real family isn't about blood relations. It's about who shows up when it matters. The strangers in Nashville, New Orleans, and Chicago embraced Danny with open hearts, while his own brother wanted him hidden away. God placed these beautiful souls in our path exactly when we needed them most. If you're living a similar story, know that you're not alone. There are grandpa stories like ours happening everywhere. Fathers, mothers, grandparents, choosing love over comfort, protection over approval. These grandpa stories remind us that courage comes in many forms. Sometimes the most powerful grandpa stories are about ordinary people making extraordinary choices for their children. The greatest lesson I learned: sometimes you have to walk away from toxic relationships to find your real tribe. God doesn't call us to accept mistreatment in the name of family loyalty. He calls us to love, fiercely protect the vulnerable, and create safe spaces where everyone can flourish. Danny and I found our freedom when we stopped seeking acceptance from people who refused to give it. We discovered that the world is full of loving hearts. You just have to be brave enough to find them. Don't wait for permission to love your child fully. Don't apologize for their differences. Celebrate them, protect them, and trust that amazing plans await both of you. These true stories matter because they show us what's possible when we choose love over fear. Your true story matters too. Share it in the comments below. Has someone in your family ever surprised you with unexpected acceptance or heartbreaking rejection? Hit that subscribe button if this story touched your heart. And please share it with anyone who needs to hear they're not alone.